Did you know that you can make one of the best all-natural fertilizers and get rid of kitchen scraps? I'll show you how with worms. So one of the best all-natural fertilizers is worm castings, and I'm going to show you how to make your own worm farm. So you're going to need 2 plastic bins with tops. This is a 17-gallon bin. Why do you need 2? Well, when I first started, my bin got too swampy, full of water. So I like to drill holes in the top bin so that it allows it to drain into the second bin. So next I want to take this first bin out. Go ahead and remove the lid. And I'm going to start drilling holes into this one. Now, the bit that I'm using has a 1/4 inch bit on it. It doesn't have to be 1/4 inch. I just found that to be a good size to allow the water to drain, but not worms to escape. And then I'll just kind of drill 2 holes in. So I've drilled about 16 holes into the bottom of this tub. It doesn't have to be 16. It just, evenly space out your holes so that it allows for drainage across the entire bin. And then once you do that, kind of shake off all the plastic shavings that came off. And then we'll put this bin, inside of the bin with no holes. So this is the bin with holes. It'll drain any excess water off and into the bottom bin. Next, we're going to put shredded cardboard in. You're going to want about 3 inches deep. I just take old boxes that I get from shipping companies, and I've got a shredder that I love. I'll put a link below if you want to shred your own. But also, you don't have to shred it. You can soak your boxes really wet and they tear apart easily, just as long as they're kind of in smaller pieces. You could also just use shredded paper if you didn't want to use cardboard, if you have a lot of paper laying around. All right, so we're at about 3 inches now. So this is way too dry for worms right now. So what we got to do is we've got to water it. And it's a lot more water than you think. So kind of mix it up so none of it is dry. We don't want any dry cardboard because worms hate dry. I don't know, you could probably see it like standing water here. Don't worry about that. Just kind of sop it up with the cardboard because it will absorb it. Alright, so a good test to see if it's wet enough is you don't feel any dry spots, and then when you squeeze it, it feels like a wet sponge, but you maybe get 1 drop out of it, but not quite. So it feels wet, and you can almost get a drop out of it, but not quite. If you've put too much water in it and you squeeze and there's multiple drops of water, then you can just add more dry cardboard and mix it in. So next I'm going to add about a tablespoon of azomite. Azomite is full of nutrition, but even more importantly, it's a grit. Worms need grit in their diet because they don't have teeth. They have gizzards, so they need grit to help them break down their food. If you don't have azomite, that's okay. Really finely ground eggshells also work. Next I'm going to add about a cup of worm castings. I know, we're making worm castings and you're like, how am I gonna add a cup? Well, you can buy good quality castings. So worms don't eat food, they eat the bacteria that grows on food. These worm castings have a lot of good bacteria in them. So by putting them in now, we're giving the worms something good to eat while the food we're about to put in grows the bacteria. If you don't have castings, you can skip this step. Just wait about a week before you add worms to the bin. Now we're just going to mix this all together. So now we add the food scraps. And I know you're going to ask me for a recipe, but there is really no recipe. It's just kind of the fresh vegetables and fruits that you have laying around that are scraps is what can go in this bin. There are some do's and don'ts. The big do's and don'ts are no meat and no dairy. And it's not that those will harm the worms, it's just that those take a long time to break down and the worms won't get to them for a while. So maggots and rats will find it before the worms do. Chili peppers are another food that you want to avoid putting in your bin, and this could actually harm your worms. The oil that makes the pepper spicy is the same oil that could harm your worms. So we just kind of want to make a thin layer of the food here. I happen to have some lettuce here, some banana peel, some apple core. There's some bell pepper tops. Really, it's just whatever fruits and vegetables you are about to throw away, you can now add to your bin. I would start out slow because when you first put worms into your bin, they're going to be a little shy and they're not going to eat right away. So slower, less food is better at first until you get a sense of how fast your worms will eat. After this, I'm just going to cover it slightly with some wet cardboard. And really, just about an inch or so, just to cover the food. This is really just to keep the pests away, to keep fruit flies from getting into your bin. Now for the part you've been waiting for, we're going to add our worms. So this 17-gallon bin will hold about 2,500 worms. So I would start by adding about 500, 600 worms to give them plenty of space to grow. I'm using red wiggler worms because they're good decomposers, but if you're a fisherman and you want to use European night crawlers or African night crawlers, then go right ahead. So check back in about a week and just kind of look through and see if they've eaten the food or not. If they haven't eaten the food, which they may not because you put them in a new environment, then leave it there. If they have eaten the food, then repeat the process of a layer of food and then a layer of cardboard. Then we'll just put the lid on it. The lid will help the worms stay in the bin, and it also will control the moisture in the bin. And really, you can put this bin anywhere that's out of the sun. Worms thrive best when it's between 55 degrees and 90 degrees. So you can put this, some people put it underneath the kitchen sink so that they have easy access for food scraps. Some people keep it in the basement. A heated garage is a good place. Really, it's up to you. Do you got a bucket, a drill, and some food scraps? Well, then you're just 20 minutes away from building a DIY worm bin that turns trash into garden treasure without the smell, the mess, or even needing a backyard. In this video, I'll show you step by step how to turn a 5-gallon bucket into a mini vermicomposting system perfect for kitchens, patios, kids, or garages. No fancy tools or fuss required. And if you love the idea of this, but aren't the DIY type, check out our website for pre-made 5-gallon kits. No muss, no fuss. All right, let's dig in and make the worm bin. Here's what you'll need. 2 food-safe 5-gallon buckets with lids, a drill with a 5/16 bit, shredded cardboard, peat moss, a few handfuls of worm compost, worm chow, and red wigglers. Step 1, we're going to drill about 6 to 8 5/16 holes into the bottom of our bin. We drill the hole so that leachate doesn't gather at the bottom of the bin, which could lead to a smelly bucket and even drown your worms. And drill some air holes in your lid. Step 2, we're going to take the bucket you just drilled holes into and place it into the second bucket. Now it's time to make this bin into a worm home. Worms like it cozy and damp, kind of like a forest floor. Here's how you make your worm bedding mix. First, you're going to need some shredded cardboard. Don't use the glossy cardboard like cereal boxes. You want to use boxes that come from shipping companies. Next, you're going to want peat moss to mix in with the cardboard. Now add water and mix until it feels like a damp sponge. You know that it's right when you squeeze it and 1 or 2 drops come out, but not anymore. Now you're going to fill the bucket about 1/3 of the way up with this mix. Now you're going to top it with a handful of worm castings. These castings are going to jumpstart the microbes in your bin. This next step is optional, but I like to add our specially formulated worm chow so that the worms have something to eat immediately. You can just sprinkle a little bit on top. It doesn't have to be the whole bag. And finally, the moment you've been waiting for, we're going to place our worms into the bin gently. I like to start with about 500 worms, which is about 1/2 pound. And I like red wigglers because they are fast decomposers. Now is the time that you can add some food scraps, but start out slow. I'm talking like 1 apple core. This is because the worms aren't used to their environment yet and they're not in the mood to eat. Just kind of bury it underneath some of the cardboard and check back in a couple of days to see if they've eaten that. If they have, you can add more food. And now just cover it with the lid that we've drilled the air holes into. See this stuff right here? This is black gold, and I'm going to show you how to make an endless supply of it for your own garden. Today, I'm going to show you how to build an underground worm system that takes your kitchen scraps, brings them outside, and puts them into the easiest composting system out there. And by the end of this video, you'll be throwing away less trash, creating a living, self-sustaining ecosystem right underneath your feet. If you've ever tried traditional composting, you probably know the struggle. These large piles can be overwhelming, attract pests, they might get smelly if you don't do it right, and they take up a lot of space in your garden. Another option is an indoor worm bin, but that creeps a lot of people out, thinking that the worms will escape and they'll wake up to them next to them on their pillow. Well, fret not, because the underground worm system solves all of those problems. It's by far the easiest way to compost. It keeps the worms out of your house. There's minimal pests, and it's easy access right in your garden. Now you can either bury it in a raised bed. Personally, I like to use every inch of my raised bed, or you can put it straight into the ground, which is what I'm going to do. Just wherever you do put it, remember that it has to have easy access because you'll be putting food scraps into it all year long. Okay, so with underground worm bins, you have 2 options. You can buy one online, pre-made, or you can do it yourself. I'm going to show you how to do both. Let's start with the pre-made. So with the pre-made bin, you want to dig a hole that's just as wide as the bin and as deep as this line here. You want a couple of inches above ground for air exchange. You can see that they've pre-made these holes. So let's start digging. Now that it's deep enough, I just fill in the dirt around it. So remember, make sure that you don't bury these air holes here. So now we're going to add the worm bedding into the bottom of the bed. And worm bedding is basically just a carbon material. I'm using coconut coir and dried leaves here today, but you could use shredded paper, shredded cardboard.
Some people use straw. It's just a place for the worms to move into. Now, we got to get this bedding wet because worms breathe through their skin and they like a moist environment, but not overly moist. So we're going to do the one squeeze test where it's just wet enough that if you squeeze it, one drop comes out. So we're aiming for about 3 inches of bedding here. Next, you can start adding some food scraps. So at this point, you have a couple of options. Worms primarily eat the bacteria that grows on food. They'll take chunks of food out when they bite the bacteria, but they're primarily targeting the bacteria that grows on the food. So we can wait about a week for bacteria to grow on this food, or we can add worm castings that will inoculate the bin, that will put bacteria in the bin immediately. Personally, I'm not a very patient guy, so I'm going to go with the worm castings route and add my worms in straight away. Next, we just add our worms. Now, a bin this size, I would probably start with about 200 worms. Now you just put the lid on. Now, there are some do's and don'ts on what you could feed your worms. We did a whole video about that. I'll leave the link here. And if you liked this worm bin or you need castings and worms, I'll leave links to those below. So there are a couple of myths about in-ground worm bins that I need to address. The first one is when people install one, they think that it's going to be like a grand central station for their worms, where their worms spread through their garden and then come back to eat, and then go out again and spread their fertilizer, and then come back and eat. That's not how it works. In fact, it's been shown that worms in their entire lifetime will spread maybe 10 feet. And worms can live to be like 4 or 5 years old. So the odds are pretty good that they're just gonna stay in that worm bin. They're kind of like teenagers. If there's food there, they're gonna stay there. The second myth is cold weather. Now, their marketing department will tell you that the earth is enough to keep those worms insulated throughout the winter. And if you live in a mild climate, that might be true. But here in Colorado, where I'm at, that's absolutely not true. Those worms will freeze. But the good news is that the cocoons that they lay, basically their eggs, those will survive the winter. So come springtime, when it warms up, the cocoons will thaw out and you'll get new worms hatching out of it. But if you're really attached to the worms that you put in there, what you have to do is look up what your frost line is for your area. You can just type in an internet search saying frost line and your zip code, and that'll tell you how deep you have to dig a bin in order for your original worms to survive. Now, here in Colorado, that line is 3 feet. I'm not willing to dig 3 feet for my worms. So I'm content enough to have my cocoons hatch in the springtime. Now, if you're really attached to those worms, you could DIY your own bin and dig that far down. I'm going to show you how to DIY it, but I'm not going to dig that deep. So to get started with our DIY in-ground worm bin, we're going to need some hardware cloth. Now, hardware cloth is kind of like chicken wire. In fact, you can use chicken wire if that's what you have on hand. I happen to have hardware cloth, so that's what I'm going to use. And I cut this hardware cloth to be 15 inches wide by 40 inches long, and that will line our hole and give our hole some structure. If you don't know where to buy hardware cloth, I'll leave a link below. So let's start digging. I'm going to dig my hole 15 inches deep by about 1 foot across. All right, now that my hole is dug, I'm going to line it with the hardware cloth. Really, the hardware cloth is just to give the hole some structure, so you don't have to fill the sides with dirt. And just like the pre-made underground bin, I'm going to add bedding, moistened bedding, about 3 inches still, food scraps, and still not patient, so I'm going to add castings to add the bacteria, and my worms. So obviously, unlike the pre-made bin, this one doesn't come with a lid. So we're going to put straw on top, and that will not only keep the light out, but will also help insulate it in the wintertime. So now you will have to remove the straw when you put in the food scraps. Just put the straw back when you're done. So there you have it, your very own underground worm bin. Other than digging a hole, a pretty easy way for continual worm castings. And you know what? I ended up with an extra underground worm bin, so I'm going to give this away to one lucky winner. So if you would like a chance to win this, click the link below.